Recording.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I just want to introduce our guest speaker today, Dan Cummings. He's coming from McDonald's Corp. He's actually in Chicago. So, Dan, I really appreciate you doing this, and I really appreciate everyone coming today. So, looking forward to your presentation. I did get a sneak peek of it, and it looked really good. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Let me make sure that I can share the proper screen here, because it seems like I'm jumping onto the wrong screen. So one. All righty. It always seems like when you're about to present, it always ends up sharing on the other screen than you think you are going to be actually on. So hopefully all of you can see a deck right now. But yeah, as Luke mentioned, my name is Dan Cummings. I am at the McDonald's Corporation. Currently, my role is a global product analytics manager. And so my primary role is in a clickstream focus. We do quite a bit of other work with analytics, but for the most part, Adobe is pretty much my bread and butter. So, but really excited to have been part of the Champions program here this year and to get to speak to you all. So, what I'm getting into, I know we're into September, into fall. Chicago doesn't have the best surfing, but figured it was at least worth throwing in a little bit of, summer towards everybody while we're getting ready for, what's for us often in the Midwest, a little bit colder time of year. So wanted to kind of show you what we've been doing, at least at a high level, to track our analytics across multiple platforms and more for how you as an analytics user, you want to use the tools available to you, not just from Adobe, but in general, the preparations you need so that you can better analyze data for folks that are coming across through different channels. When I say channels, I mean whether they're using their mobile device, whether they're on a traditional laptop, desktop, or now some of the other technological devices that are appearing in stores. So for us, that would be our self-order kiosks, at the airport. That's becoming more and more of a big part of people's experience in terms of checking in for a flight. And in a lot of stores, you're starting to see this become a much greater part of the overall experience. So let me see. There we go. So yeah, as I mentioned, at McDonald's, I've been in roles working with Adobe Analytics now for 11 years. 10 plus sounds a little bit fancier, but for the older folks that have been working with Adobe for quite a while, I do date back to the Omniture Site Catalyst days. So I feel like that's a little Stripes situation. So just to show, not a completely unbiased, I do have my certification in both Adobe and Google Analytics. So I've used both. Obviously, being an Adobe Analytics champion, the value Adobe brings overall, and very excited to be at a company that really has put Adobe Analytics at like the heart of its clickstream program. I actually come from a background that was more in criminal justice and social science research. I was a public policy major, and in leaving DC, which is where I was at for the first few years of my professional life, realized government was a thing of an industry, and where I'm at now, very quick moving. Technology in general, as you know, changes month to month and year to year. I'm sure you've all had similar struggles with dealing with some of Apple's announcements with things like the Ask Track, and have dealt with the constant algorithm changes that Google has subjected us to with no warning. So lots of different things that I'm sure you've all dealt with. So positively and negatively speaking, lots we've had to juggle. And yeah, as Luke mentioned, from Chicago currently, but originally from Rhode Island. And yeah, spent some time in DC and State College. So very excited to see that my football team's currently 4th in the country, although I don't know how long that will last. We'll see. So using the surfing analogy in general, we as analysts or end users of our data, we're really asked to stay on top of a lot of information. even dating back to 10, 15 years ago, there was an observed year to year just in the total volume of data in clickstream. I think it's one of the less understood aspects for businesses in general. So we're often leaned on to not only understand how to collect this data, but also how to make sense of the data. And so I felt like surfing was a good analogy, only in the sense that, we are looking to coast along a very large data wave. And in clickstream in general, we're asked to be a part of basically the volume of decision making and just the granularity that's involved in actually tracking a user's experience. Just to give a kind of a general sense, I know you're all very aware of this, but some of the statistics that show how much data is really growing. The amount of data generated each second is expected to go 700% higher this year. And 80% of data is now unstructured or semi-structured. I had to double check the exabyte. It doesn't come across very often, but 2 exabytes, which is in the above trillions of data each day. And most companies, and this is a big one we struggle with, we're only analyzing 12% of the data. Or I should say, most companies are only analyzing 12% of the data. That's really the mountain is, okay, we have the data. Now what do we do with it? And with clickstream, I think that's a big common thing. And it's why Adobe Analytics is leaned on so heavily. They take care of a lot of the analysis for you. They put it into a more usable format, but there's still so much more that we can do beyond just the basics to get more out of our information. Because if we don't stay on top of the data wave, we do end up wiping out, essentially. So that is obviously what we want to avoid. I promise that'll be probably the last really bad pun. I'm joking. There will be plenty of terrible puns. But I did like this quote quite a bit before we jump into the meat of the matter. This is actually probably a good analogy for the past couple of years we've all been going through. But John Kabat-Zinn, you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Essentially meaning, like, we can't stop the turbulence. We can't stop this momentum of data. By learning how to actually manage it, to stay ahead of it, to plan ahead for it, I think is the biggest thing. There's really just a ton of amazing insight and a lot that we can do. And quite honestly, with that planning, it makes us look really good if we know how to use these tools at our disposal. Speed to insight, those low-hanging fruit options. It really does make you look good, make your company look good, to be able to point these things out and extract knowledge from that information. So just to show the Adobe Analytics sizing, and speaking in general terms, but just for our company, we're projecting to have over 150 trillion server calls in the next year. Each one has dozens of data points within it. So you can imagine from that wave conversation, we definitely have quite a bit of it coming in. That is just our Adobe Analytics data. That is our budgeting. So that's not to say that we won't exceed that. Just in the US, we are over 3.5 million sessions, and our tech platforms are seeing over 1,000 occurrences every second. So there is always data flowing in. And being a global company, there is no downtime. There is no opportunity to completely frictionlessly update and change things. We're always having to kind of update on the fly. And so the planning is really, really important for us, making sure that we're rolling out with a very clear tagging structure, making sure we're rolling out, knowing our KPIs well ahead of time. All that's very important. And despite all that volume, we still do not have the full complement of our technology on Adobe Analytics. We are rolling it out as quickly as we can. We're being very successful in that effort, I would say, but we are a very large organization. We're at nearly 40,000 locations worldwide. It really does amass into quite a large task to get everybody up and running on this platform. So I think we're doing a good job with it, but at the same time, it is something that it definitely takes a village to do. And so as the person in charge of the clickstream, it really is a big task for me. And I'm proud to say we're doing pretty well with it and continuing to make strides every day. So I think what is interesting to go through. We as a company have a couple different platforms, the channels I was discussing, surfing across. We have our traditional.com platform. So on our website, it's for an Adobe Analytics implementation, the one that we're probably all most familiar with. For those that maybe are less experienced with Adobe, it was designed on the web, essentially, initially. That was the initial platform that people were visiting online. E-commerce platforms were really the early frontier of clickstream. And so because of that, it is very easy to implement into debug. It's the one that has the most experience behind it, the most documentation. It's really been the most experienced one for all of us. And so as analysts, we have plenty of out-of-the-box reporting templates, standard dimensions, and events available to us. And yeah, when you're doing your hiring, if you happen to be in a leadership position, this is the one that when you talk to people who have Adobe Analytics experience or Google Analytics experience, oftentimes it's going to be in this area. It is very cool. I've gotten to see more and more people who are still in college.
And I think you muted yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
I don't know how that happened. I didn't hit a key. I apologize.
You've seen more and more people in college. That's where we like you.
I'm glad I came right there. So yeah, more and more people in college. Thankfully, it seems like it's become it's become more and more of a major that people can focus on. So whether they're going back and making that their degree, or your first time in college, you want to focus in analytics, it's really cool to have seen that has become something you can focus on in education. It was not an option when I was in college. So a lot of folks, when I first started, came out of accounting or social sciences, things like that. So those folks maybe have a bit more exposure into using these tools on mobile apps or kiosks. But yeah, most of the time you're going to find a lot of your experience in the .com. And the Adobe Analytics tools, a lot of the ones I learned how to use Adobe Analytics with, do have plugins and features that are only available on the web or mostly fit to the web. But in terms of shortcomings for us, as a quick serve restaurant, we don't have the opportunity to do a lot of sales on our .com. We're not really an e-commerce platform. It is very order a hamburger from your computer and ready to go. Delivery now, so that is starting to become an option on the website. But for the most part, our sales are not going to ever be driven by by a website. Even in those traditionally more leaning towards e-commerce, your Amazons and your traditional businesses, they too are starting to lean more and more on apps and mobile traffic. And so really the website aspect is really only one segment, and it's a shrinking segment of your user base. So you definitely want to be prepared to use analytics on other tools. I threw up a couple of visuals for folks that may be less familiar. Obviously, the activity map is a great tool. It is really only one you can use on the web comfortably. And I've actually been a big fan of, for folks that might know, an Omnibug has always been a great way for me to debug Adobe Analytics implementations for my site and actually for other people's sites. I'm one of those weirdos that likes to snoop and see what they're using. And so it's a great way to look and see what's being fired, to check what your competitors are doing or what tools they're using. So a nice little side plug for Omnibug. But for the most part, I mentioned, there's only so much we can gain, at McDonald's using only web analytics. And so our bread and butter really is in the mobile app. For the mobile app, for people experienced with it, it really does offer so much more in terms of engagement. So notifications, personalization to your users. We just launched our Make Rewards loyalty program, which has been fantastic. It's been getting people. That really does require the app to get the most power out of it, because that's where you're going to be able to see where your points are, see what rewards you have available, see some of those offers that are specifically catered to you. And as I mentioned, the web really is starting to shrink in terms of traffic. Mobile devices make up the majority of traffic just to .com sites. So this is talking in the browser, 61% in 2020. So over half of people who are on a website, a standard website, are doing it from a mobile device. Then if you take the number of people on mobile devices, 86% of the time they're going to apps. And so if you have an app and a .com, odds are there's very high likelihood they're going to use your app. Obviously, they need to see a benefit to take the time to search you out in the App Store and to download, to give you space. Obviously, there's pretty big phones, but they still have to dedicate that space on the, maybe the space is more important on the real estate on their homepage. But that said, a lot more people are going to be willing to say, hey, this app seems to have a lot more benefits. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's why the app really becomes really important. For us at McDonald's, it's a key part of what we call the mobile ordering platform. So our global mobile app has an MOP program, is what we call it, mobile order place program. In order to most effectively, you need to have the app because we are actually able to detect that you're close enough so that we can start your food knowing that you're close enough to the restaurant and that you're in the app, you check in. That lets us know you're there. We can make your food fresh, and by the time you get to the register, you're able to pick that up. It hasn't been sitting there under a heat lamp or anything. It's fresh and made for you, ready to go. So we've really put a lot of our passion into that app. We're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, a lot of the strides we've been able to make. But there are shortcomings with using Adobe Analytics on that platform. It's definitely a bit more complex to implement and debug. For us, we're using both SDK, a solution design kit, and we're using a data platform to help manage that information. So it's not just a simple drop of code. It actually has to be driven into the code itself. So to the second point, making major changes means that you may have to make a full app release. So it's not as simple as switching a line of code or making a quick debug on the fly. It takes a little bit more planning, and the turnaround time is going to be a bit longer, which does add a little bit more risk if you're going to make any changes. And then one big thing I kind of hinted at earlier that's definitely come up more and more, external changes and regulations by the mobile providers has been really big for any gamers out there. Been quite a big battle between Epic, who run the game Fortnite, and Apple over where you can actually pay for some of the in-game elements. Been kind of a mess. And so it's really difficult to know day to day which way that was going to go. For the more holistic, for the of apps, just their removal of the has been a huge change for us. The fact that people can opt out more easily from having an ad identifier changes the landscape of how we can identify our users. And so we had to pivot, get ready for how that was going to roll out. And then once they made the switch in late April, analyze what the effect was. And so that's something that is more sensitive in the app than it might be on .com. Like I mentioned, .com, you can make those changes and those pivots a little bit faster. So it's something you have to be prepared for. But we've been able to do some really great things with our analytics. This is actually an old heat map we built out using screenshots from our app. It's not baked right within the tool, but we've been able to pretty easily port out analytics and heat map our data to show what the most frequent activity was. And so this is a couple years old, which is why I didn't have to protect the data too much. These are old menu pages, but you can see that our deals were very popular. And so we were able to see where people were really clicking around in the app. In terms of our debugging tool, we currently use mParticle as our platform for managing our data layer and actually processing the data. But we've also done some proxies through a tool called Charles. You can do this with a few other tools, but looking at what's actually firing through a proxy, it's definitely more complex than if you recall my showing of the Omnibug. It was a lot more clean. This is a little bit more complex, but it's one that's not too bad to use. And the knowledge base for that is definitely growing. But what's going to be interesting to see, and as I go into this last one really fast, all of these things can kind of play ball together in the same environment. And I think there's a lot of benefit to doing that. The last category for us, and this is by no means to say that there aren't other avenues, and for us in terms of expansion, We have boards and, the drive-through boards that might end up being more and more interesting to actually add into our clickstream or to our environment in that sense. But the one area we've really expanded into in the last few years is our kiosk. We have a self-order kiosk in the restaurant. If you visited a McDonald's or at least looked in the window if your local McDonald's has been closed for in-store eating, we do have menu boards, interactive boards. So, like I mentioned, similar to the airport, you can actually go engage with that. It's actually a great load for COVID. So if you are open, you don't feel comfortable talking to somebody face to face, it is a great way to actually interact there if you don't have the mobile app quite yet. But we do actually see that it's been really beneficial to have, because as a newer industry evolution, there's not a ton of industry baselines. There are not a ton of use cases for kiosk. And so we really do gain a ton of information from the clickstream analytics we've been able to collect on the kiosk. And what's really interesting is now you're almost getting a new insight into the customers. Now you're watching them step by step. Instead of them just stating they want a number 4, you're seeing how they go through the menu, what they navigate, what they check out. Did they look for an offer? Let's see if there's something relevant that they might want to add first. They might feel more comfortable customizing their order on a kiosk because they're not now asking someone. It almost seems like more of an imposition, which it is never an imposition. But if you want to customize something, it might be a little bit easier to see that or to understand the costs of, hey, if I wanted to add bacon to a Big Mac, how much that would run you. So we get to see that process a little bit more real time, which is great. It's a little bit more insight into the customer. But again, similar to the mobile app, there's not a very clear one size fits all out of the box solution for that. So there is a lot of customization needed. For us, our kiosk platforms actually send the data via a way station. So we don't have the kiosk fully set up to the internet for privacy purposes and security purposes. Especially when we're dealing with credit cards and things like that, it can be a very risky business to have people doing that on a device that's connected to live internet. And so as a result, the technology is there and set up so that we can collect the data at a regular cadence, but without having that there. So there is a customized solution we had to build into that. However, the learning curve and the statistics are all very much well worth it to learn about. So with users actually having to learn how to use a kiosk, the kiosk is not going to be set up similar to, say Delta's at the airport and checking in. Completely different menus, completely different features. So it does take people a couple of minutes to actually use the tool. And so there are elements to consider. It's going to take a little bit longer to learn how to navigate that kiosk the first couple of times. What's been very difficult before a loyalty program, there was no way to identify the user. The person's a first-time user or not. You have to kind of infer it by how quickly they use it. The odds of them being distracted by, like, as simple as, hey, the front counter's open and they're asking if you want to just go up and place your order there. That might end up being a fallout for us on the kiosk order. But in reality, it was cannibalization from inside the restaurant. It was an employee working against our statistics. But that's just reality. That's something that we have to control for. But as mentioned in the benefits, because this is so new, we learn something new every day from the kiosk. So it's really beneficial, in getting over the hump of some of these more customization of the implementation have been really worth it and really great.
Mm.
But, sorry.
Yes, Dan. Oh my gosh, this is
great.
A couple things. Number one, it's hilarious to see how your front person cannibalized the kiosk. Yes. And number two, I just can't imagine stuff not being connected to the internet. That just blows my mind. I don't know. I think everything's connected anymore. So
yeah, so it's a security thing, and it's one that, with full connection to the internet, but essentially those updates, those things that are occurring are done, before the restaurant's open, after, things are taken down for a minute, just for that security purpose. Because as you might, sometimes things go viral where you can see that the menu boards have failed or something's gone wrong. we're trying to limit that as much as possible. Obviously, doesn't look great.
Yeah. And Jeff Bloomer does comment. He wants to know if he can swap out his yellow egg for the white egg on the kiosk or the mobile app. He wants to personalize his order.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, using the egg, non-egg whites or turned upside down. Yeah. So I'll have to double check on the swap out of the egg. But yeah, essentially, all these tools are very much towards the same goal of we would balance food, but they're very different platforms. To show you is how to get these different data that makes them easier to analyze, to socialize, and evangelize within your organization.
So a quick question, Dan. So on the kiosk, how do you guys implement Adobe on there? Like with the apps, you got the SDK, which is with the web, you have your normal JavaScript.
Yeah, it's similarly put on there, like similar to an SDK, but essentially with this, we're using a way station that's doing the data collection. So it's grabbing all the information, all the individual beacons are relayed and collected. And so as people are clicking through, it basically grabs everything and brings it up and filters it into Adobe and orders it based on the timestamp, the piece of technology, et cetera. So there is an identifier for each kiosk. So we can see what restaurant they're in, what location in the restaurant. So sometimes there might be two, one on the left, one on the right. We have those identified. When we bring those data points into Adobe, we can sequence them properly based on the time stamping. And then we actually are looking for periods of inactivity to separate out the different visits. So for us, if somebody doesn't finish their order, what's been an interesting, how do we know that somebody walked away from the kiosk and the next person in line came in and maybe started their visit? So we have to look for a couple of warning signs. Sometimes there's the start over hit button. Somebody started an order, placed a few items in and left. Yeah, I don't want, whatever weird item somebody ordered before me. I like pickles and these people took the pickles off everything. That is obviously going to be a bigger indicator. But for some, they might have been browsing and never added anything into the cart. So when you get up there, it may look like that was all part of one visit. And so that's what's been difficult, is looking for those periods of inactivity, looking for our timeout period. So that's about 90 seconds of inactivity. The whole kiosk will reset, clear out the basket, et cetera. These are things that we are doing our best to identify. So it's almost the opposite of the 30 minutes of inactivity becoming the end of a session. We are now looking for periods of inactivity to actually tell us the end of the session, even if it's not 30 minutes. So we've had to do a little bit of customization on the back end, but yeah, the data is being sent every 15 minutes through the way station, and then Adobe is actually gathering the information and collecting it, but sequencing it based on the timestamp it occurred rather than the timestamp received. So short specifics, obviously. Great.
One more question for you, Dan.
Oh,
Shane, hey Shane, woo. He wants to know, is it added, and maybe I missed it, maybe you already said and I missed it, so I apologize. Is it added via Adobe Launch or some other mechanism? So I apologize if I missed that, sorry.
No, I did. So I don't believe it's on Adobe Launch. The way it's actually designed, I'd have to check into the technology itself. There are people much smarter than I that actually implement the information on there. But yeah, it sits natively on the way station is sitting natively on the kiosks themselves. So the data collection is getting routed through similar to a mobile app, just on a cadence. It's not a live connection. But yeah, I'd be happy to get more specifics and see if how much I can answer without getting into industry secrets there at least.
Don't get in trouble, yeah. Don't get your fries taken away.
Yes, we're a big company, which means we have big legal shoes as well. So I don't want to get in too much trouble. But what I will say is, from an Adobe perspective, we've been able to do some really neat things with the kiosk as well. Obviously, the fallouts are fairly common, but we've been able to actually look at those fallouts and overlay them with screenshots of the kiosk itself. So, doing comparisons in relation to another. Looking at how people fall through versus fall out on those different data points. And yeah, a lot of the reports we've been able to build, as I'm going to get into, we can start to sequence them to look very similar to what we're actually reporting in the mobile app and on the .com platform as well. So that's kind of where I'm going to jump into. Like I mentioned, these are all very disparate pieces of technology. So it is very natural for data silos to form. Honestly, when you're talking about 3 different processes that have different steps, different pieces of technology, it's just bound to happen. It's always going to start in a silo. So, for us, we have limited ordering on our .com, as I mentioned. We only have delivery. It's not available everywhere on .com. And depending on where you are in the world, you may not be close enough. There may not be a third-party organization that can provide the delivery. We partner with several companies, DoorDash and Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes up in Canada. So like, depending on where they have availability, we may not be able to deliver to you. So the .com might have no ordering available to you. For loyalty signups, you have to do that on the computer on a mobile device. We don't have sign up on the kiosk, quite honestly, because we don't want people to spend 20 minutes on the kiosk and have a line form behind them. Maybe something that we can set up a little bit more fluidly to kind of place your first order and attribute it to you after the fact, send you something. I think there's some great opportunities there that, our great UX and design teams are working on now. And then the mobile ordering has more options than the kiosk for fulfillment. And that's quite, honestly, it's because it'd be very odd to go in and place an order on a kiosk and then jump in the car and go into the so when you order at the kiosk, you can only eat in or take out. Mobile ordering, you can actually do curbside, which is my favorite. So you can just pull into a parking space and they bring the food to you, or you can go through the drive-through or use those other methods as well. So there are definitely different features available on these, but bringing these through together has been really valuable to us. We've been able to actually look holistically at all of our ordering and compare and contrast and really learn from each different platform, help the other platforms out by like learning. Some of the learnings we've been able to get from mobile while we were developing Kiosk helped us design the kiosk better. So obviously the biggest step that you need to take is properly tagging, implementing your tagging so that it's working properly. I will skip that part. I'm going to assume that, for folks working in Adobe, you've got a pretty good read on that.
Where's the love button? I want to say love to that. Implement it right. That needs a heart.
Yeah. So, and for us, like a big part, honestly, for us has been making sure that people are giving the love to Adobe Analytics and clickstream in general in terms of debugging, QAing, and tracking everything. Sometimes tech teams, dev teams, they don't want to pay as much attention to that as just the work they have to do in coding. They have so much work to do. But it's been awesome to see how much interest and how much importance analytics has been getting. The more and more we show the benefits of it, I think that's the biggest thing. So always always let your tech folks know what you do with that data so that they know why it's important when you're bugging them to fix something last minute. So for other than the proper tagging, keys and identifiers is a fairly easy concept to state, but very complex to make sure it's working properly. So making sure that we can identify our users, identify the location that they're at, so what restaurant they're in, or if they're in a certain region where we do or don't have delivery, and what technology they're using. Obviously, that's something that you have been tracking across any of, like even at .com, knowing what browsers people are using. That's always been a big, valuable piece of information about your user base. But identifying that stuff becomes even more tantamount in this situation. Hopefully you guys know a UTS, Universal Tagging System. It's incredible. It's the biggest thing that you need in this situation because you need to design broadly enough for everybody to have all their information on all the different platforms collected so that you can analyze it all together. But you need the specificity to actually get the details for the insight. So I'll get into more detail on that in a bit as well. And then documentation and reference. Documentation is a dry topic. It is so much more valuable, especially these days as we're working across the globe. A lot of us working remote. And just the fact that a lot of times you're handing off, or sharing the responsibility of some of this work with other people. If they don't know exactly what you did and why you did it, you're gonna cause errors at some point. Someone's gonna change somebody else's work. So I'll get into that a little bit as well. And there's some tools in Adobe that actually make this a lot easier as well. And then, yeah, virtual report suites has been a big part of our setup. We'll definitely dive into that a bit more. And then, as I mentioned, there are some internal tools that really do help pass that information along, evangelize and socialize it within the business as well. So the biggest things that I mentioned for identifying the keys for the individual users, it's been something that we're just now getting more and more insight through our loyalty program. Now that we have our loyalty users able to identify at the kiosk, at the drive-thru, at the front counter when they're ordering, we're now able to follow the journey of an individual user and see how they use, how they order at McDonald's, how many McDonald's they order at, what their favorite items are. We can actually make it easy for you to place that order the next time you come to the restaurant. So if you do have a very specific order on your Big Mac, instead of having to customize and hit a bunch of buttons, you're able to actually order that item exactly how you like it. I would say you can have it your way. I'm not allowed to say that. So it's been really great, not just for us to see how we can better benefit the customer and how we can actually design the use of the technology better, but also it makes it a lot more beneficial for the user to say, hey, I can order faster. I can use Siri to literally place my usual order on the way to work. And Siri will make sure that when I pull up into the drive-thru, the order's already placed. I just have to check in and I'm good to go. The technology and the channel being used, obviously this is going to vary from technology to technology. So our kiosks are all generally the same technology. They're all a Windows-based device. They're all in the restaurant. Versus mobile phone is going to go across a breadth of different manufacturers, sizing, the operating system, et cetera. So obviously having the design for the key of the technology is going to allow us to see what people are using for a mobile device, for those that might be more on the UX side, knowing how responsive the design needs to be if they're on a browser. All that's really important for the overall experience. And then, yeah, our cross-platform identification has been huge. The identification via a login. Obviously, with a privacy perspective, this isn't something we can do or should do without the consent of the user. And so that's why having a program with a sign-in has really become critical, just because now you need to show the benefit and be very upfront with your user base to be transparent and fully upfront with your users what you're going to do with their data and how they can opt out of that. Things like the GDPR, CCPA, these protections are all for an important reason, making it more difficult to track individuals, because that security that's a trust that your customers really need to have in you before they're going to be willing to use technology with your company. And then, yeah, things like the AMC ID, the Adobe Marketing Cloud ID, or any other identifier that's going to connect to your non-Adobe data is huge. So for us, obviously, we have a very long tail of sales information going back into the 50s. Obviously, it doesn't have the technology connected right there, but we have a lot of data we can connect from ages ago from different markets that may not be up on our mobile app, things like that. So having any identifiers that could connect to those other data sources that might either expand our history or, provide more information about the restaurant, the user base, et cetera, that's all going to be very valuable to analyzing. So things that we really leverage within Adobe include the standard variables. Obviously, those are coming in automatically, but the mobile, the product, the visitor details, those have all been very important to us. But we lean even more heavily on the props and evars, so custom conversion and traffic, and our custom events. Those have been really huge for us to be able to identify, even, for example, on our kiosk, what language they're selecting, or on the mobile phone, what language they're in. So knowing, in particular, in a certain market that we have a very high percentage of folks that might be speaking French or Spanish, in Canada, knowing where that dividing line of where folks are more likely to speak French in the French Canadian areas versus English in the non-French Canadian areas is really important. And knowing where we have to be prepared to translate our menu into those different languages has been really valuable. And then classification rules in general has provided a huge way for us to use variables that might be broadly defined because they have to fit in information from multiple pieces of technology, but in a way that we can then get more specific. So in information through one EVAR or prop that we can split into 3 or 4 where relevant. And then obviously I'll get into virtual report suites in a second, but controlling out for where you actually need that information has really been huge, and it's really done a lot for us to actually make the data look a lot cleaner. So it's easier for us to understand and analyze, but especially when you're bringing that data in front of leadership, it helps to have it much more cleaned up and polished looking rather than, that unprocessed code.
Dan, something you said cracked me up on that page, because I think all of my jobs that I've had, the people are in the same location, but then when you said like what McDonald's did I go to, like just last weekend, I was at McDonald's up here in Kansas City, Missouri. And then my family and I went down to Joplin, Missouri to watch my niece run in a cross country meet, and we went to McDonald's down there. So yeah, that's just something I don't think any of my jobs have had, where people physically move yet still are, using McDonald's or, using my product. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because one of the biggest things we pride ourselves on as a company is, we're heavily franchisee owned and operated. And so obviously one of the reasons people might go to a McDonald's when doing all that traveling is the consistency. It's the food they know. The fries you're going to get are those same good fries you're going to get everywhere. But some franchisees might put more emphasis on things, might make specific offers that are only to that region, et cetera. So like being able to showcase those different regional differences is really important. It also allows us with technology to do some testing in different markets. Our loyalty program actually rolled out at the beginning of this year in a couple of areas. So we were able to see early on what people were doing with the loyalty program. And so being able to actually isolate down to those different points was really important. But for people that might have been on the border, they might go to a McDonald's in the morning that has it and go to the McDonald's at night that doesn't have it. And so, yeah, it's odd. You have to control for those differences.
So, quick question, Dan. On the app, what do you consider the end of a conversion event? This is actually when you actually pay it at the store or for the purchase?
So it's a good question, because there's an interesting complexity to that, which is, as a business where you can't really complete the order away from the restaurant, there can be 1 or 2 visits involved in your overall order. You could, if you wanted right now, I could place an order for that I'm going to plan to pick up in a few hours. Not a lot of people do that. Understandably, it feels like you're ordering food that's going to sit there. You're not actually. So if I place the order right now and I go pick it up in a couple of hours, the checkout will have occurred in 1 visit, and my next visit will be the check-in. So when I reopen the app, it'll say, hey, you placed this order. Are you at the restaurant? Are you on your way? I can then go to the restaurant and check in, and it'll recognize them in the geofence, or I can force it through if I want to. And then they'll start making the food, but that could occur in a second visit. So for us, the overall order is completed and fulfilled when they check in. We don't charge your card or anything until we are making your food and you're going to receive your food. But you might have checked out earlier, or you might build a cart and save it for later. And so these things can happen over most part. People are placing those orders right about the time they're going to leave, and there isn't going to be that 30 minutes of inactivity. So the overall journey would be through checkout and through to check-in and the fulfillment, and then they would receive their food. So the other thing that's a little tricky is the receiving of the food is not a tech based medium. We don't have digital fries yet. So them receiving the food actually happens outside the app. And so by the point of the check-in, that's kind of our last interaction that's occurring in the app. That's the last thing we can track with clickstream. And so that's one of those big reasons why the connection to those outside data sources is so important. It's our way to actually connect to the point of sale system. We can see the order identifier and how it actually executed and was fulfilled. Because there is a non-zero drop-off of folks that might have checked in but not actually picked up their food, or they might have struggled to the restaurant. And so By no means do we want a tech issue to be the reason why you're having a difficulty with the food. So, people can show the app to an experience leader or a team member, and they can help you out there if you have a problem. So there's a lot of, like I mentioned, the outside external influences that can
yeah, because with
impact
apps,
the
it's like
experience.
you actually make the purchase, but then like whenever I order food, it doesn't actually charge until I actually get to the store and say, hey, where I'm at. So I was just very curious about that from an analytics point of view.
Right. Yeah. So technically it can happen over 2 visits, but yeah, the check-in is kind of the end of the journey. That's kind of the end of the funnel for us. I know I'm running over, which I know I'm very wordy, so I'll try to do these a little bit quick.
Now, this is all awesome stuff. You're doing, go for it.
Cool. Well, universal tagging system. So for us, the biggest thing that we've been tasked to do is build a broad enough system to collect everything. So that means we're not mixing values captured in a proper in EVAR. So if we have something that's only specific to mobile, we keep that either empty or in a way that it's not going to confuse the expiration or the allocation, the field type that's actually stored there, and we're not mixing our data points. So you don't want to have platform and EVAR 3 for mobile devices, but then EVAR 3 is reused on Kiosk maybe for product. That would obviously make it very messy to analyze across these platforms. This also means you have one identifiable source of truth for your tagging. So your tagging schema is very clearly defined. If you have a team of analysts and engineers, they're not going to overwrite each other's work. And the greatest thing as an analyst is this means once you have it set up, you can lift and shift your reports between report suites. So I can build something for, say, the US market, and because I use the same tagging system, I can actually just copy it and use it in Germany. And I can copy it and use it in the UK. And there's going to be some slight market differences we have to analyze, but it means that you're producing, every time you create one report, you created 10 reports. And so that looks good, and it allows you to help all these markets simultaneously and learn more about your business by having one tagging system. It really is great. And so even for a moderately sized business, having it so that maybe each report suite, you might have 5 report suites total. One report becomes 5 reports every time. And so now you've literally cut your work down to 20%, which is great.
Yep. Hey, quick question from Eric. I assume this is from the app. Are you using the geofence or places capacity provided by Adobe?
So we are not using the one provided by Adobe. And the reason for that is because it's being triggered for the point of sale system and our technology to actually make the food. Adobe is kind of just along for the ride for that. So Adobe can see that it's within the geofence, but that's not the one that's populating to the restaurant, hey, they're in the geofence. I'd have to get the specifics on the technology because I'm not involved in the actual rally points that are being used and the distance between, but it ends up being between about 500 feet to 1,000 feet. But yeah, it's not controlled by Adobe itself.
Just like the loyalty programs.
Yes, it's been really big. And in particular, we had a McCafe program. So it was just coffee based. I think people were upset to see it go away, but I know it basically became part of the loyalty program, and those points got attributed to the new loyalty program. So you didn't lose any of that, which was great. But especially in Canada, of the coffee program, they were very nervous that they were going to lose all the earnings they had. So the last point about the UTS, it is a lot easier to do in-panel comparisons. I think for all of us, I'm going to look for the nodding face, the nodding faces here. It's been a struggle to know that within the same panel, you can't look at multiple report suites. You have to put in multiple panels. You can copy a panel, put them side by side, but you can't use the same graph and workspace for multiple report suites. So having the comparisons in the same report suite, it makes it going cross suite. I hope that will change in the near future. I know it's something that we've talked about, but we'll see. I mentioned documentation. I won't go into a ton of detail on it because I know you know that having that information readily available, democratized, up to date, it's really important for all aspects of the business. But in addition to using things like a Confluence or a GitHub or whatever technology you use to track in-company information, workspace templates are huge. If you can build out a report that you really think well encompasses analyzing at a high level, a low level, a specific level aspects of the business. Save a template of it, because then you can tell other folks that are working at the company now or later, they have access to actually just start, ahead of the game. They're not starting from scratch. Using tags has been huge. I actually included a couple of ones that we use at McDonald's. Being able to quick filter your segments, your metrics, or favorite some of these things makes it easier to reference them. And then when you're in Workspace, using the hashtag and the tag that you're using, you can group just the segments and metrics that apply to that tag. It's awesome. It's super helpful. Annotations is in labs right now. I'll show a screenshot from that, but a data point to indicate over the course of the history, like when a certain day or a range was impacted by something, or just to mark like a sales point, like, hey, this is the start of our business year. Maybe we start July 1. You can actually mark that in the annotations. So hopefully it will graduate from labs to actual production workspace, but a really cool option to note. And then there's descriptions and note fields everywhere within workspaces now. And the note fields and descriptions on things like the segments, never leave them blank. Like, keep the information a little bit more detailed. Just put any context that's useful there. Having it blank, and this applies just to the props and evars too. Having just a quick, this is what the heck this means, is going to save people a lot of confusion down the road, especially if you have, McDonald's, we use tons of acronyms. It gets very confusing. Explaining that, writing that out is going to help people a lot, especially if, say, down the road, that's not the same acronym they're using anymore. So all this history is really important. But Adobe has a lot of features that make it easier, which is great.
Yeah. Quick question. Are you leveraging the global report suite? Because I know you're about ready to talk about VRF.
So the global report suite, we actually this dovetails right into this question. So I'm saying here. So for us, we actually control everything into one market. So we do not have one giant report suite. We actually have each report suite officially by market. The reason we do that is, well, the biggest, I should say, is the legal and governance requirements for things like GDPR, CCPA. For GDPR purposes, the data for those markets needs to be stored in the European Union. It has to be over there. It can't be stored in the US. And because of that, we can actually set different standards for our different markets. It's also really important because it gives ownership to the markets over their data. Ultimately, they can decide what they want to do with it. They can set those, maybe they can set a more strict retention policy for the market. They're able to make those decisions. They can also toggle features on and off. One market may not want to offer mobile ordering. It's been very successful, but maybe they have security issues, or they just don't want to support the technology or the cost for that. They can toggle it off, and it doesn't affect the other analytics for the other markets. And yeah, the autonomy has been really important during the pandemic too, because for us, early stage, Italy was pretty much closed. The UK completely shuttered their restaurants for a couple of months, whereas other market like Australia at that point hadn't really been affected. And so it was business as usual for the most part for them. They need to have different treatment aspects at some points. And then, yeah, adding a new market means no disruption, no need to take anything down or change anything or expand anything at that point. We can add a new country. If Antarctica wants to get a McDonald's franchise, we can add them in there, and it doesn't affect anything that. So.
Got some insider information there. Like, all right, Antarctica, it's the next place.
Yeah, I mean,
teasing.
We'll see how things are going. If it's a little warmer there. So I know I'm running short on time, and I do want to leave at least a little time for questions. Tools to leverage. Admin console is going to be your best friend. It probably already is if you're an administrator, but the fact that you can control what individuals can use for report suites, for tools, for profiles, that becomes even more important as you have different report suites for different markets. So I can set it up where there's a privacy so that one market can't necessarily look at, or, more importantly, change the settings on another market. You can be very diligent about who actually has the availability to look across them as well. We're one company, we're trying to help each other out, but obviously there are different things that work better or worse in other markets. And so that contextualization is really important. So, and then yes, with all the legal challenges, growth in some of the privacy rules that are going on, we have to be able to be flexible to one market without affecting another. I mentioned the workspace templates, so I won't go into too much detail there. The notes section, as I mentioned, using those anywhere you can, adding that detail, even if it's it feels like you're duplicating just the naming convention, it can be helpful just to at least explain with a little bit, a couple more words, what you're actually doing, when it was created, why it was created, for what market it was actually designed. That's a big one for us. Something we run into a lot is we have recents and favorites that help you order an item that you've ordered in the past or that you've marked as a favorite item of yours. In some markets, we have to spell that with a U. In other markets, we spell it without the U. So obviously, we build our segments broadly enough to capture both. But if you had somebody that was only designing it using the British spelling, you might have an issue if you applied it to the US market. I mentioned the description. It's an easy right-click drop-down to edit description. You can add notes. We love to add it for actual definitions of the metrics as well as if we had a metric that only started halfway through the chart, explaining why it came up at that point, what happened. The annotation has been really huge for us, as I mentioned, for releases. So when we release different versions of our app, different iterations, we love to do a pre-post comparison of the new features or a feature that we changed. Having that marked right on the chart means you can actually see that, hey, we had an uptick in sales right at the point we released. It's correlation, doesn't mean causation, but hey, there looks like it's a good sign what we did for that release is aligned with a positive increase in our sales. And then the biggest thing that we're starting to delve more and more into, and I mentioned before, is those direct connections for your data through either data feeds, your data warehouse, using the data insertion API, and connecting all that other information. It doesn't live in a vacuum. Adobe Analytics should just be one piece of your data puzzle. But having it set up in a way that it's broadly defined enough so it can play ball, you can connect the dots to all these other data points, only means that it's going to be more valuable to the rest of your business, to the leadership at your company. So put a recap, but I won't go into like everything. Basically, I think in general, building your analytics platform in general, having your report suites built out, these different data points is going to really allow you to do a lot more connecting of activity between, say, your mobile device, your kiosk, or web traffic. We're starting to get into it more and more with our gaming. So although it's not around in the US anymore, you can learn more. The Monopoly program is still really huge in the UK and Australia. They're actually going live right now. They're live right now with those programs. So being able to go on the computer and look at your pieces and maybe get your instant wins set up in there. All that activity being interconnected is really important, so we can make sure that we're providing the best possible technology experience for our users and our customers. And so, yeah, hopefully just setting things up in this way makes it easier to measure that and make changes that improve the experience for your users. And I had questions and discussion, but I know I'm over, so I apologize that I talked too much.
No, this was awesome. You got peppered with questions throughout, so you're good.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on annotations. I actually helped beta test that, but that was like, I don't know, 6 months to a year ago, I want to say. So, because that was one of the biggest things that I did like, or to help explain, big anomalies in the data, or say, hey, when something happened, we had this release, or when I working for a telecom company, when the iPhone releases, or when the keynote is, things like that. So.
Yeah, funny enough too. Yeah, like back in the day, it would have been really helpful. I worked at a textbook company. I was not part of setting the prices.
Amazon?
No, not Amazon.
Okay.
But worked with them. But anytime there were major snowstorms around like the height of this book selling season, the numbers would plummet because the school might shut down for a couple of days. They may not even be able to get into the building, and so they wouldn't worry about purchasing their textbooks at that point. We'd have to control for bigger snowstorms and know, like, hey, the entire East Coast was shut down because of a big, nor'easter that came through. So our numbers took a dip. That is entirely external. It has nothing to do with the business. And so having an annotation would have been huge. But yeah, unfortunately.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I think looking through chat, looks like you answered everybody's questions, and this has been phenomenal. So awesome.
That's great.
Yep. Jeff likes your validation. So.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how popular was the BTS promo?
It was very popular. It's funny. You might say it was so popular that it encouraged other businesses to start celebrity meals. So we see you, Nelly. But yeah, it really was really exciting, as that was one of our first times doing a global promotion like that. So our celebrity meals have been, for the most part, US specific, and the different markets have done their own. Like with holiday meals or different promotions, BTS being such a global icon, rolling that out into multiple markets means that we got to see how that affected each individual market, and also look collectively at how the performance went as well. Also, I do think that we should have more promotions where we have different nugget sauces, because between that and the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce, I feel like it's an easy win to offer some new dipping sauces.
Yep. Oh, is there a secret McDonald's menu?
So unofficially.
Should we stop recording? Should we stop recording? I feel like we should start recording this point on.
So it's funny, because I've looked at that for other companies as well, and I don't think if you went in and ordered, I know there's some colorful language for a couple of them that you can order, but I don't think everybody would necessarily know what you're ordering. Look online, like I think Reddit has several of them too, like where you can order specific things, but no, not like In-N-Out, where like I think like animal style is pretty much on their menu at this point. I don't believe there's anything, but that pretty much ask for any customizations you want, and some of them come with a cost, things like that. And if you make a favorite item, you do a customization in the app, you can name it something. And so in a way, that is your secret menu. That's always an option, but yeah, I don't know that informally like if you formally went in and said a name, a code name, I don't know that everybody would necessarily know it.
Yep.
With their menu.
I really do like the app, Jeff. I mean, Dan. So
the what?
I really like the app.
Oh, thank you.
My preferred way. That's my preferred way of ordering now.
Yeah, I thought you were referring to a secret menu item, and I was like, I don't know that one.
No, I really like that. I really like the app, because even if I'm going to the drive-thru, I'll pull in, do the order, and just wait for them to bring the food out.
Yeah, it's been great, and yeah, the timing on it was fantastic, because I do think with COVID, just the fact that the ordering changed so much. I mean, at one point after the UK was closed, when they reopened, they only reopened drive-thrus. So the lines were around the block, but because they could still order curbside, that was your cut. You could cut the line essentially through the app. And having a low contact way to order, even in the restaurant, you can go in and sit down at a table and order on your app, and they'll bring you your food. You don't have to even go to the counter.
Oh, wow.
So if you go to a restaurant and you see table markers, you can do that, or you can order at the kiosk and take a table tent with a number and just go to sit down, and they'll bring you your food. So it's pretty neat. You get a little bit more of a restaurant experience, but also from a security and safety perspective, means less contact face to face, which I think can help people a lot feel more confident about being safe right now.
I feel like you're stepping up my McDonald's game, giving me all like the pro tips. Like, this is how to do it. Pro tip.
Well, now we need to develop the secret menu so that we can have that behind the scenes. So.
Okay. Are there any last minute questions for Dan?
Awesome.
Look at the.
I think we're good. Dan, really appreciate you coming here. This has been awesome. So
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just want to let everyone know we'll be having an October event, so 2 months in a row, which is not what we normally do, but there'll be news on that, within the next week or so. So we're excited about it.
Awesome.
Wow.
Good slide.
I didn't build up for nothing, right? Well, thank you very much. Yeah, feel free to connect, reach out if I can help answer anything further.
Yeah,
Awesome.
just loving it.
Oh, you can say it, Luke. I guess Dan cannot, right? Awesome. See you
All
guys.
right. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. All right. Wow.